name is Jesse Campbell. I'm a Métis Cree mural painter from Victoria, BC. I started painting murals about, I think it was 2010, so it's been about 8 or 9 years now. I started getting involved with murals through the Songhees and Esquimalt First Nations here in Victoria, and that was part of the Unity Wall project down at Ogden Point. And before that, I was mainly, I painted sort of recreationally, and I lived up in Comox for many years, and I learned a lot about First Nations design from the Comox Nation and up and down the coast here. And working with the Songhees, it really sort of led me into working a lot more with more traditional design forms. And so a lot of my teachings and a lot of the history that I was sort of learned was from this territory. And growing up, I really learned a lot about my ancestral home and my ancestral stories. So that leads to the question, where do I come from, and what are these stories, and what is this history, right? When I was growing up, I'd hear little bits and pieces, and it was kind of, it was almost awkward for me because I always knew I was Métis and Cree. I'd hang out with my friends in Comox, and they knew their aunties, and they could tell them stories for however long ago, but I never really had that. And once I started asking those questions, I kind of realized that things weren't as easy and weren't as clean cut as were for a lot of other people. And so eventually I ended up at Open Space here as part of something called the Indigenous Youth Arts Showcase, which happened I think 4 or 5 years ago now, thanks to Doug Jarvis, Peter Morin of the Tahltan Nation, and Sarah Hunt. And they really sort of created the program to help incubate young artists and connect them with older artistic mentors. And from there I really learned a lot more about what is culture, what are these questions, where do we come from, and what is our responsibility as artists to continue that legacy. So over the years I've painted quite a few more murals, and this year will actually be the first year I'm doing art full time. It's something I never really wanted to do actually. Everyone wanted me to be an artist, but I thought, well, I'm not going to do that because that's what everyone wants me to do. So I went into marine biology, and I went into environmental technology, and this is just something that fit for me. So throughout that process, there's a lot of learning. When you picture an artist and you picture the French painter or something, and you don't really have a picture in your mind of what an Indigenous artist looks like. And myself especially, I do a lot of different things. I'm kind of a strongman. I work for World Fisheries Trust to do research for them, and then I do the art thing. And I think that's just more encompassing of the reality of modern urban Indigenous people and modern Métis people and modern Cree people, is that we don't necessarily fit within these categorical boxes of what a Métis, Cree person or any Indigenous person should look like and what they should be doing. And that sort of led to this piece, the searching for where I came from, what are these histories, and what exactly does it mean to be a Métis Cree person, and how difficult it is for a lot of people to sort of try and reclaim their ancestry, myself included. And so in this piece, in the lower section, the overall title of the piece is Blanketing. So the star blanket is it's sort of an honoring representation. A lot of ceremony is given, a lot of ceremony based around the star blanket is sort of honor, like a rites of passage. And so oftentimes people are given a star blanket, so when they come of age, during a birth, stuff like that. And so I kind of wanted to honor Open Space in helping me in my sort of art career, and by honoring them with these blankets. And I also wanted to sort of have the blankets be a representation of what it means to be, again, an urban Indigenous person that doesn't necessarily look like an Indigenous artist. So this lower section, we have this blanket here, and I really wanted to put something in this lower part of the gallery with all these windows, because as you're walking by, a lot of these tourist shops in town here, they have a lot of native art up on the walls. Sometimes it's made by actual native artists, sometimes it's made by copycats in China or something. And people walk by and they either gawk at it, or they look at it and they walk past, or they ignore it. and they don't really understand the cultural significance or the nuance of what these designs mean. What is their history? Where do they come from? Who was the person that made it? And I wanted to sort of play on that because we have these questions. What does an indigenous artist look like? You know, what are they doing? And we don't really know. And a lot of people don't pick up on that significance when they're walking by a storefront or by a gallery or whatever. And so I wanted to draw the viewer in. And maybe someone will ask that question. Who made that? And what does it mean? Depicted in this star blanket, we have a lot of colors which are represented in the Métis sash. And it's also a representation of sort of my life here on the West Coast. And so we'll see this in the blanket upstairs as well. We have sort of a theme where we have this brown and the green is sort of representing the trees, and the trees reaching out to the Pacific. And at the core we have the yellow, and we have the orange and the red. And that's representing sort of my Métis Cree heritage coming from the core, and having that reaching out to the West Coast here, and sort of having that interconnection. One thing I kind of battle with is, where's my right as a Métis Cree person to be displaying my art in Victoria, traditional Lekwungen territory? And how do I honor people from this coast and this territory without taking up space? And in this piece, I kind of wanted to represent myself, but also find a way to sort of represent this territory without necessarily doing their work for them. Meaning, what I mean by doing their work is representing their culture in sort of a way that was me doing their representation. You know, nothing about us without us is something that Chief Ron Sam said, and it's something that sticks with me. Whenever I talk about people from this territory, whenever I talk about my territory, and whenever I hear people talking about First Nations people. So upstairs here, walk up, sort of part two of the blanket. So this design here was representative of my mom. So she came to Victoria and BC in the 90s, and she was leaving an abusive relationship. So she came from her home territory of Manitoba out here. She was born in Swan River, Manitoba, and grew up in Winnipeg and Thompson, and moved out here to get out of that relationship and had my older sister in tow. And eventually she settled down and met my dad, and here I am, right? And through that, there was a lot of history there, obviously. Growing up there, and my mom's side of the family, they're all from that territory. And my grandpa, my mom's dad, went to residential school. And the story that I hear is that he never told anyone until he was in his 60s and dying of cancer. And so this was like an old man, right? This was, he'd been around for a while, and he held on to that for years and years. And it wasn't until he was dying that he kind of told people about that, and he felt like it was necessary to share and to have that, finally have that freedom. And that's something that always stuck with me because, for one, as an Indigenous person, I mean, we can't understate the effects of residential schooling and cultural genocide. But also, as the only artist in the family, like, there's a lot of responsibility there. And I feel that unless I try and tell that story and tell my people's history, more specifically my family's history in a way, that's going to be lost. And so that's why this blanket is here. In the center we have the white star. That's representative of my grandpa. I've put white suns and white stars in a lot of other murals I've done in town, and this is a continuation on that. And again, we have the colors of the prairies, the sunrise, the yellow and the orange and the red sort of radiating outward. And so that's also representing of the east, of my grandpa's territory and my mom's journey. And that's extending out to the west. Here we have the blues, that's the Pacific Ocean, and then again we have the browns and the greens, the trees out here reaching out to the center. And so they're meeting together in harmony to make this overall picture that you see before you. When I was working on this piece, it was kind of difficult because I had all these ideas and I had all these thoughts, and again, I had been practicing artistic forms from this coast and I have a lot of teachings from Haudegui as well. I was like, how do I represent, you know, Métis Cree work? How do I represent this? Because that's not where my teachings come from, really. You know, I have this history, but I don't have the lessons. I didn't want to do that in an improper way, so I kept thinking about what's the process and what's the history, what's my parents' history, what's the history that I know, and how can I best represent that, and how can I do that in one piece, you know? Obviously we have 2 blankets here, but there's a lot of stuff to go through. You're gonna need more than 1 blanket, you know? Throughout the painting process, I mean, each one of these sections is individually painted. I didn't use any tape or anything like that. And so there's a lot of fine lines and there's a lot of concentration that comes into that, right? A lot of deciding the palette, a lot of deciding, okay, how to get this perfect line and then do it again to recode it. And throughout that, I just kept thinking about what I want to represent, and then these memories started coming back. You know, stuff I remember from being 8, and you know, I think I was last time I was in Manitoba, I was 12, turning 13, and just hearing these stories, and they started coming together, and it you know, literally and metaphorically started painting a picture in my mind, and things just kind of came together, and that was really my hope, because whenever we're exploring like our own history, and you know, especially mine, it's been kind of this patchwork. And whenever you ask questions, sometimes you don't find that missing piece. You just get more questions. But I feel like a lot of other people are going through that as well. A lot of urban Indigenous people, a lot of people who are taken by the 60 scoop, a lot of people who want to find out more about their ancestry, and find it's not always as easy as typing in your last name on Ancestry.com and hoping for the best, right? You know, history and culture and family dynamics are much more complex than that. But in the end, sometimes when you step back and look at the overall picture, you see how each little piece fits together, and how when you're focusing on one line, when you step back, it all kind of comes together. So that was an important lesson while I was painting this. Was, you know, day by day there's this one little thing you need to focus on or whatever, but in the end it's an honoring. You know, I'm here to honor both my journey as an artist and what this space has done for me, but also uphold those traditions that were almost lost, right? And culture is ever evolving at the same time too. I mean, we're at a point in our history where, okay, yeah, we're modern people, you know, we're no longer fur trading and stuff like that, whatever that's supposed to mean. We're civilized is one word I heard. But that doesn't mean that these traditions change or go away, they evolve. So this isn't a blanket, this isn't, you know, beadwork. This is still my interpretation of my ancestry. And it's put within this context, and it's put within the context of a lower gallery to tell the story of how, when people look at us, the perspective changes, and how that perspective is always going to change depending on what you know about the person. And so I want to really examine that dynamic while we're producing this piece. The one thing I should mention is why this piece is here specifically, in this orientation, in this angle, at this height, and this far over the staircase. As I had mentioned, in producing work and exploring culture, it's never quite within our reach. Asking questions just produces more questions sometimes, and it's never as cut and dry as it seems. And also, depending on who's telling the story or who's receiving the information, the optics change. And so, although like I live on this territory, I'm always wanting to learn more about my culture and my history. But there's also a separation, a geographic separation between me and being on the land and being on the home territory of my people. And although we can go there and visit, it's always quite out of reach. And so that's why I wanted to put this mural here, is that we can look at it, we can admire it, we can take its teachings and its lessons, but physically it's always quite out of our reach. My grandpa is there, but he's not with me. What I can reach is this coast here, and my mother coming here, and me receiving those teachings, and her receiving the teachings from her dad, and that sort of connection. And when we sit and we look at this piece, we stand over here, the perspective changes, but it's still balanced. It's still radiating out from the center. And it's over here, you're seeing it full on, but you see how it still bends around corners and how it's still approaching you. And when you try and photograph this piece, the perspective is still going to change because you're looking at it through a screen and not through your eyes. And it's the same thing when it comes to hearing stories. Each time, depending on the set and the setting and how we approach the story, it's going to change a little bit. And when I approach my history, sometimes I gain a little bit more by who I'm asking or how I'm asking, even though it's the same question. And so that was a dynamic I really noticed in, I guess I wouldn't call it research, but in my exploration around the ideas before painting this, was how, I'd ask the same questions to my mom every now and then, and sometimes she'd give me a short answer, sometimes she'd give me a really long answer. And it really just depends on where you're at and how she's feeling, right? Mm-hmm. So that's why we're kind of situated here in this semi-precarious situation, is that the sun's always going to be shining here. But how you approach it, sometimes it's always going to be that much farther away.